Okay, so now we're going to go to applications. This is the third and final segment of this session. Hope you enjoy it. Remember I promised you to look at the concept of place matters? Well, it does. You know, in all of my work and my research, that's one of the core values that I come back to. Place matters. Place is a social container, isn't it? It holds our culture. It holds our belief system and our values and our behavior and our rituals and our history and our routines and our interactions. It's a bubble that contains all of those things. So place matters. Where we are, where we work, where we live, where our history is, where our present is, matters. One of the things that is unfortunate in my area of study in criminology is that almost everything we know about crime and youth and justice and those kinds of interactions and system results are based on research in urban areas. So you tell me, would you expect to have the same outcomes for sort of a one-size-fits-all model that was designed for people in places on the left? And how would that map, well, onto the places that you see on the right? Are they the same? Of course not. The experiences, the belief systems, the behaviors, the outcomes, some of them may be common, but some are very different, right? So we have to pay attention, and that's one of the first missions of Our Town, Our Kids, is to look at differences by place, by size of place, but also other characteristics, and how the uniqueness that those places hold as a container should be considered when we look at solving problems for our youth. So in this case, let's look at the rural areas first and some of the characteristics. We have, first of all, geographic isolation. That's a core characteristic of rural areas, right? This means that there's a difference in access to resources. There's an emphasis on anonymity and privacy. There's low diversity typically. Often a suspicion of outsiders accompany that. Over on the top, though, we have a very different density of ties, where everyone knows your name, comes together fairly regularly, whether you want to or not. And this means that we have very close acquaintanceships in rural areas. I grew up on the farm in a tiny little community called Harmony. We didn't have a post office. It was just a little farming community called Harmony. And not only did everyone know everyone else's name, but everyone else's business, right? We have a lot of emphasis in rural areas on informal social control, less reporting to officials in rural areas, and more stigma attached when someone is labeled with a particular aspect or characteristic. There's also more traditional values, specifically speaking for rural areas, but certainly there can be some differences, but generally speaking. Family name is really important. How many generations has your family been here? And the newcomers are the ones that maybe only have 2 or 3 generations history in that community, right? So family name becomes a marker, different from in the cityscape, right? There's higher religiosity. There's lower tolerance for change overall. So these kinds of characteristics carry over then into how we think about juvenile justice and the strategies that we use to address the challenges that our youth face. As a matter of fact, we even have polls And this one was really interesting because it says that rural Americans themselves say that they have different values from the people, their city cousins, so to speak. Rural Americans who say values of people in big cities are different from them is 68%, compared to urban Americans who say their values are different from people in rural areas. Only 48% answer in the affirmative to that. The same with those that responded to, oh, they're very different. There was 41% in rural areas that say their values are very different from city folks. And urbanites, only 18% of them said that their values are very different. So again, that perception is important, but the actual day-to-day living characteristics are important as well. This might suggest to us that there's also a difference in fairness, in our ideas about fairness and how that works out. Let's look at the urban areas for a second. Population density, of course, is very much different. We all know. This means a difference in access to resources, lower privacy, high diversity and tolerance, greater isolation from nature. Social relationships are formed somewhat differently. There's a much faster pace. Social mobility is intensified, and a more complicated lifestyle. Thirdly, the rules and regulations are very different in urban areas than or at least enacted differently, and there's a greater emphasis on formal social control in urban areas. All of these differences make a difference. They really do. Just as one small example, we often do surveys in sociology and criminology to gauge various kinds of inquiries into social interactions and so forth. And one of the common ones is, especially when we're talking about youth, is how, sort of how stressful is their environment. And we want to know something about the neighborhood and their experiences in it. So even how you ask that question varies greatly upon its meaning and the point of reference in an urban and rural areas. So for example, they might ask, this is a common question, have you ever lost someone to violence? Because let's say in Chicago, where there's maybe 100 shootings on a given weekend, that has very specific meaning. In a rural area, I'm not sure that people would even know how to respond to that. Most people, at least. What about this one? How many times a week do you hear a gunshot? Again, think about that in Chicago. It might be daily. It might be several times a day. It might be once a week, depending on which section of town you might live in. But in the country, in a rural area, even if you hear a gunshot, in a gun culture, in a hunting culture, that might have a very different meaning. So we just have to be very aware of how place matters and the importance of connecting and perception and how we interact, how we answer that question, and the implications for the belief system that follows and the behaviors. Okay, so now we're entering the very last part of this and some helpful tips. I used to, I'm a teacher, a college level teacher, and I taught social interaction for many, many years. And I used a lot of these, and we would do classroom exercises. So for me, it brings back a lot of memories and a lot of fun. So I hope you will enjoy a few of them and try them out. You'd be surprised how well just having a few little tips in your pocket about interaction and communication might make a difference. It's not just because it's the nice thing to do, but it works. It works a lot. And speaking of my teaching and my training, I had a mentor one time who told me this: treat every student as though their heart is breaking. For some of them, it is. Man, that was a life lesson for me, because we get really wrapped up in day-to-day excuses and absences and no homework and calling in sick and my grandmother died again and whatever it might be. There's a book that's called that, literally, My Grandmother Died Again. So it's easy to lose sight of the person, of the experiences behind that student. And that's I've carried that with me since then, and it really helps get through some of those tough times, but also is a nice reminder about the humanity in all of us. So let's do this little test. Test yourself. Are you respectful of the cultural practices, attitudes, and beliefs of others? It's really easy to nod and say yes, but question yourself a minute. Think about it. Are you? Do you show consideration by considering their point of view? Are you polite and listen with genuine interest? Do you respect your peers' right to privacy about their own culture? A fine line there, a fine balance. We also know that nonverbal cues are extremely important. As a matter of fact, 2/3 of a message can come across from nonverbal communications: facial expressions, tone, posture, tone of voice, all of those kinds of gestures and expressions can say a lot. Are we paying attention? Be aware of messages sent and received. I have to constantly remind myself of that. Am I sending a message that's clear, or can someone misinterpret my gesture or my scowl on my lip, on my brow, or when I bite my lip? I think I do that a lot. Maybe I think that I'm just contemplating about something and someone else is going, oh my God, she hated that. What did I do? What did I do wrong? So being aware of that is a great first step. Taking the initiative, not just a reaction, but the initiative to act in a friendly, inclusive way. So all of these can unlock communication in a really, really important way. So now let's look at some concrete phrases and tips that you can use. I can see how you might feel that way. So if you're in conflict with someone and having some disagreements, or you can't get your point across and they can't seem to understand what you're trying to say and vice versa, just pause, take a deep breath and say, I can see how you might feel that way. Not, well, I can see how you might feel that way. So again, that tone is very important. Now, your inside voice might be saying, are you kidding me? How could anyone possibly believe that? Or I don't understand why you can't see it my way. But that phrase is like magic. It infers that you're together, that you are open, that you have a willingness. That's sawabona. You are a part of me and I am a part of you. I see you. I really, really see you. And that seems to lower everyone's blood pressure a bit and allow everyone to take a breath, to pause, and to consider the other's point of view. There's one step further that you can take. This is a challenge to you. If I were you, I would feel the same way. And your inside voice may be saying, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I could never think that. That is ridiculous. How? I don't understand. I don't understand. And I would never do that, say that, think that, be that, whatever it is that is the point of disagreement. So I'm not asking you to lie about it. What am I asking you to do? I'm asking you to put yourself into their shoes. Just that simple. Because if you were them, with their knowledge, with their belief system, with their behavior, with their history, with their experiences, with their life, then you would feel that way, because that is how they feel. They're expressing to you how they feel. That's a measure of trust. If I were you, I would feel the same way. So now we have an even closer relationship that again gives us some space to hear one another. It doesn't mean that they win, you win, or that anyone is convinced of how this is going to work out. But it does mean that you're coming to them on an even plane, and that you can then translate that into something more productive, and more productive means of communication. And finally, I saved the best till last. This one is absolutely a unicorn. It's magic. I invite you to use it every chance you get. Well, use it sparingly, really. You don't want to overuse it. Would you be willing? Would you be willing to sit down and talk to me about this? Would you be willing to listen to how I see this? Would you be willing to try this just once? Do you see how it would be very difficult then for someone to say no? Now, they might, but it certainly makes a better field for communication and for trying it out. Here's just a few others, just as examples for things you might keep in your back pocket. Will you help me understand? What was it? What was the best part about whatever, or the worst part, or the most challenging part? If you could do X again, what would you do differently, if anything? Those open up very different channels of communication. So concluding, think about this as an investment in working with and for youth. First of all, Aretha Franklin was right. RESPECT is the magic word. And if you take nothing away but that one word, whether it's in your personal life, professional life, business life, it's absolutely a keystone for making life a little bit better, about taking a step toward a mutual consideration of how we solve a problem. How we model to kids and to others, of course, is especially important. I love this little quote. They may forget what you say, but they never forget how you make them feel. So culturally competent communication is essential. It's teachable, it's learnable, and it's doable. The rest is up to you. Thanks, and I hope to see you soon. Bye-bye. Our Town, Our Kids is a pilot project funded through the Kansas Department of Corrections, Kansas Advisory Group, and the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. The university group is K-State Juvenile Justice Collaborative, a multidisciplinary team from Kansas State University, Fort Hays State University, and K-State Extension. Ultimately, Our Town, Our Kids aims to empower local communities with a scalable, comprehensive set of tools which will stand as an exemplar to other counties across Kansas and beyond. For more information, please go to our website at ourtownourkids.org or reach out to us directly with questions, concerns, and feedback. Thank you for your time and attention.